Chapter 40. America. A New World, 1991. My relatives and closest friends gathered at Hongqiao Airport to see me off, including Director Hu was there to give a final farewell. At the terminal, Qiuling cared for Yunlu and managed last-minute details, leaving us little opportunity to converse. My steps felt light and oddly heavy as I approached the departure gate. My mind was blank, numb, and distant. With each step, I knew I was leaving my Qiuling and Yunlu behind. I sensed Qiuling's gaze but could not turn back to look into her deep, dark eyes, so pure, steady, and sincere. I was bidding farewell to my siblings. I was parting from my classmates, my closest friends, and Director Hu, my colleague. I was leaving behind the land that had shaped my identity, my homeland. I was abandoning it all, and perhaps this was a final farewell. Once I entered the waiting lounge, the tears I had fought to hold back finally overflowed. On January 12, 1991, I took a one-way flight to San Francisco. As the plane soared into the clear blue sky, I looked out of the cabin window at a vast sea of white clouds drifting like silver mist over a chasm. I said to myself, I am free. I am truly free. I realized this was a dream many Chinese people wouldn't dare to entertain, not even in their wildest dreams. Excitement surged within me, a jolt of exhilaration. Yet, underneath, a subtle sadness lingered. What sacrifices had I made for this moment? Everything except my life, maybe. Still, I had no idea what awaited me. All I knew was that I was heading toward a free world, stepping into a new reality. A new reality. As the plane soared east over the expansive Pacific Ocean, daylight gently faded, transforming into a golden twilight. I gazed in awe as the sky shifted from fiery hues to amber and gray. Almost unnoticed, night descended. We were crossing the international date line, transitioning from one time zone to another, from one world to a different one. The plane pressed forward through the darkness, soaring over the endless Pacific, inching closer to the American West Coast. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the sky, scattering like shards of gold along the horizon. Below, as the aircraft circled in descent, the first outlines of land emerged, coastlines stretching endlessly, weaving like silver threads against the deep blue ocean. There it was. The USA! The western frontier of the New World. The legendary Golden State, California. I felt unsure of my purpose when I first arrived in America, despite my assumptions. 5 centuries ago, Columbus and his crew embarked on a perilous journey across the harsh Atlantic, seeking an uncharted world and forever reshaping history. In contrast, 500 years later, I merely traded $1,000 for a plane ticket, boarded a plane designed in this new world, and crossed the Pacific in under 12 hours, landing in a place once thought impossible to reach. But what exactly was I in search of? What set this land apart from the rest? Why had I left behind everything I had ever known to come here? Was there still some undiscovered new world waiting to be found? Or was I searching for something far greater, something I had yet to name? After passing through customs in San Francisco, I boarded a connecting flight to Denver, Colorado. Upon disembarking at Denver International Airport, I was immediately enveloped in a whirlwind of activity travelers rushing past, flight announcements echoing, and the continuous clatter of luggage wheels. I took a deep breath, trying to orient myself while scanning for signs towards the bus station. Remembering my time in China, I compared it to the hectic transitions from train stations to bus terminals, where the scene was alive with shouting, honking horns, and an ever-present crowd. Here, however, everything felt distinctly different, spacious, serene, almost surreal. As I meandered through the terminal, attempting to grasp my environment, an elderly woman walked by, maneuvering a small suitcase. She caught my eye, paused briefly, then came to a stop. With a kind, knowing smile, she inquired,
"Do you need assistance?"
Her voice was soft and unpretentious, yet her demeanor instantly calmed me. I hadn't spoken a word or sought directions, but she somehow sensed my uncertainty. I briefly paused before asking, "How do I reach the bus station?" She nodded as if she anticipated my question.
"I'm heading to the bus, too,"
she replied comfortingly.
"Just follow me."
We turned a corner, and there it was. The Greyhound bus terminal, nestled inside the airport. I stared at it, momentarily taken aback. In China, traveling by long-distance bus meant navigating chaotic city streets and hunting for a distant, overcrowded depot. You wouldn't find a bus station conveniently located in a train station. While waiting, our discussion unfolded smoothly and naturally, despite my arrival from a different world just hours ago. She told me she was from Michigan, visiting her son in Denver for the holidays, and was now on her way home. I told her I had just arrived from China and was heading to Kansas for school. Her face glowed with curiosity, tempered by a quiet, profound understanding. It wasn't just her words, or the gentle kindness in her gaze that captivated me. In that fleeting moment at a bus terminal on a frigid winter night after leaving my family, friends, and country behind, I sensed a profound change within me. A simple realization took root in my heart. Human warmth knows no borders. Connection isn't defined by nationality, language, or even familiarity. It emerges in tiny moments, through a stranger's kindness, and in the quiet hope one soul holds for another to find their path. Contrary to its unremarkable name, the Greyhound bus ride was a surprisingly luxurious experience. As I boarded the bus, I was amazed. Unlike the crowded, bumpy, long-haul buses in China, this experience was entirely different. Spacious, airplane-style reclining seats, climate control with heating and air conditioning, an onboard restroom clean, functional, and impressively well kept. This was American long-distance travel. Reclining in my seat, I was enveloped by fatigue. Hours slipped away in a haze of sleepiness and quiet anticipation. Around 3 a.m., the driver's voice crackled through the intercom. "Hayes." Bleary-eyed, I stepped off the bus, dragging my 2 heavy suitcases behind me. This was a gas station. Where was the bus station? I stood in the freezing night air, surveying my surroundings. The place was silent and desolate, a stark contrast to China's bustling, chaotic stations. A few dim streetlights flickered along the narrow roads, casting elongated shadows in the cold. So this was Hayes, a town so small that its long-distance bus stop was at a gas station. I let out a quiet chuckle at the unexpected contrast. I had a phone number for the university's international student office, responsible for picking up new arrivals. I found a public payphone nearby, convenient enough. But it was 3 a.m. Could I truly call someone and wake them at this hour? I opted to wait. As I wandered to kill time, I spotted a stack of newspapers outside the small gas station store. Intrigued, I grabbed one. It was substantial, almost as hefty as my Chinese dictionaries. I glanced at the date. It was today's newspaper. Hold on. At 3 a.m., a new newspaper was already delivered to this little isolated town. I was once again astonished. Back home, even at government offices, Getting some real news could take days, if not weeks. And yet here, in one of the remotest and smallest towns I had ever seen, the latest world news had arrived before dawn. Excited, I sat on the cold pavement outside the shop, flipping through the pages. This was a world unlike any other, an unfiltered world. Growing up, I lived in a country where information was heavily filtered and controlled, dictated by the party's central propaganda department, which decided what news reached the public. I was encountering something completely different for the first time. A world where knowledge and information flowed freely. A world where newspapers lay unguarded on gas station floors, ready for anyone to pick up and read. A world where truth was no longer limited to whispers, but printed for everyone to see. For the first time, I wasn't merely watching from a distance. I felt genuinely connected to this new world in the rural Midwest. At 6 a.m., I contacted the school to inform them I was at the bus station, awaiting a ride. While I was still reading the newspaper, turning its pages, a police car unexpectedly rushed into the lot with its lights flashing. I was in shock. Had someone alerted the authorities? Here I was, a solitary foreigner, lingering in the darkness, sifting through a pile of newspapers that technically belonged to someone else. I myself felt suspicious. A police officer appeared, surveying the surroundings. My pulse raced. He approached my luggage and pointed at it before turning towards me. I walked over as he effortlessly lifted my 2 heavy suitcases and placed them in the trunk of his police vehicle.
"Welcome to Hayes,"
he said, extending his hand.
"I'm here to take you to campus."
Had the university really sent a police car to pick me up? I clambered into the passenger seat, still processing the scene. A police car? To greet a foreign student? In China, police were feared, known for interrogations, surveillance, and political crackdowns. But here... Moments later, we arrived at a large stone structure building before a spacious open lawn.
"We've arrived."
The officer exited the vehicle, grabbed one of my suitcases, and headed toward the entrance. I trailed behind, still trying to comprehend it all. Wait, was this the university already? I hadn't spotted the entrance gate. Had we reached the campus without going through its gates? My first class at an American university was classical British literature. The professor stood at the front of the room, passionately lecturing on Chaucer's poetry. I flipped through the thick British literature textbook I had just purchased, frantically searching for the passage being discussed. But I couldn't even figure out where we were. I barely understood a word. The whole experience felt like a foggy dream, an unsteady journey through unfamiliar terrain, with no map and no sense of direction. The classroom was filled with young, golden-haired, blue-eyed students, most of them in their early 20s. And then there was I, black-haired, brown-eyed, already in my 30s. As I scanned the room, I caught glimpses of their expressions. Their eyes were kind, yet there was an undeniable curiosity, even a trace of pity. What was a Chinese student doing here, studying British literature? If we even find this difficult, how could he possibly grasp it? Yet, over time, I adjusted to university life. Slowly, I learned to keep pace with the lectures, discussions, and assignments. On my first Sunday morning in America, I awoke to a fresh layer of snow blanketing the ground. Coming from Shanghai, where snow was a rare delight, I felt thrilled. Approaching noon, lacing up my running shoes, I was setting off campus, eager to explore the town and enjoy the winter snow. As I jogged Main Street, I was shocked to find out that there were no shops open. The streets felt deserted, save for a few elderly people passing by. I struggled to grasp that numerous businesses across American towns and cities remain closed on Sundays. This puzzled me thoroughly. How could a wealthy and ambitious nation like the United States afford to shut down for an entire day? With such vast economic productivity and consumer power, why would businesses take this break? Why was Sunday, one of the busiest shopping days in China, utterly quiet here? Where were all the people? What were they up to? How do these stores generate revenue if they close every Sunday? It was yet another astonishing discovery in this new world, leaving me with questions that lingered long after the snow melted. One question continued to puzzle me and the other Chinese students who had arrived over the months. Why does the university have no gate? In China, a prestigious university had to have gates, massive, fortified iron structures towering over the entrance like palace walls, standing as symbols of authority and academia. A school without a gate was unthinkable. It would lack prestige, order, and its identity. In 1988, Qiuling and I journeyed to Beijing, excited to explore Peking University, renowned as China's premier institution for higher education. Upon our arrival, however, we discovered the gates firmly closed, with armed guards at the entrance. Entry was denied. It felt like a closed, fortified environment, clearly signaling that outsiders were unwelcome. A handful of inquisitive classmates began to dig deeper and ultimately uncovered an astonishing fact. The university actually lacked gates. Instead, a simple sign was placed unobtrusively by the roadside, much like a typical highway exit marker. Unbelievable. This was America, unpretentious, unguarded, open. A place where a state university blended seamlessly into the land it stood on. A place where higher education wasn't locked behind walls but woven into the fabric of the community. And so my journey in American academia began. One day, during a literature class discussion, the professor asked students to analyze the protagonist's personality traits in the novel he had assigned us to read. He walked around the room, calling on students one by one. I sat there, hoping I'd be overlooked. I was struggling to keep up with the professor's carefully enunciated English. My classmates' casual, slang-filled American English was even worse. Half the time, I had no idea what they were saying and why they laughed. I reassured myself. Surely the professor wouldn't single out the only non-native speaker in the room, right? But then, the professor walked towards me, looking straight at me, and asked me,
"What do you think?"
It was like thunder. My mind went blank. All the English words I had diligently memorized disappeared without a trace. In utter desperation, one solitary word suddenly emerged in my mind. Open. Open, I muttered, as if in a daze, barely conscious of what I was saying. The professor nodded approvingly. He seemed quite open himself, satisfied with whatever answer I had just given. I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. Somehow I felt I had survived. Later I became fixated on the word open for some time. I browsed various dictionaries, dissecting their literal, figurative, and philosophical interpretations. How could this single word, uttered in a moment of panic, not only fit within the classroom context, but also connect me politically to China's reformist discourse while simultaneously resonating with America's focus on openness? Was it sheer luck, or was it destiny? Less than a week into my stay in America, I encountered yet another new reality. A Chinese student was preparing to transfer to a different university in another state. He owned a 10-year-old Ford sedan with a small dent on the rear left side. Although it wasn't significant, he preferred not to take it with him and opted to sell it instead. I was amazed. In China, personal transactions were seen as evil speculation and profiteering. A person caught reselling for profit could face imprisonment, but here in the States this seemed completely normal. I inquired about the price. His response nearly knocked me off my feet.
$250.
$250? My breath caught in my throat. Was this a mistake? Did I mishear? In China, even a basic bicycle costs over 100 yuan. A car? That was a dream beyond reach, something seen only in movies. Sensing my hesitation, he shrugged.
Fine. Let's make it $200. We're both from Shanghai. Consider it a hometown discount.
I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a car, it was a fantasy. I immediately handed him the money, signed the paperwork at the DMV, bought insurance, and made sure the car was legally mine within 20 minutes. I didn't have a driver's license. I was a complete foreigner, yet I already owned a car. Just a few weeks earlier, I was working for the government in China, overseeing an impressive fleet of vehicles that included Japanese Nissans and Crowns and German Audis and Santana. However, despite having access to these cars, they were never truly mine. They were state property, not for personal ownership. Obtaining one through standard means was impossible. Now I was a car owner. I no longer required approval stamps from organizations or leaders, nor did I need to sense the moods of officials or navigate complex bureaucracies. Although I paid only $200, this car represented my first genuine possession, something fully mine, without any strings or governmental approval. It was just a straightforward transaction, supported by law, acknowledged by the system, and regarded as personal property. This was a transformative experience. The so-called evil and corrupt system of private ownership that China had eliminated for decades turned out to be remarkably beneficial, simple, efficient, convenient, and perhaps unexpectedly, even humane.